people think that goes away in April with the heat.
Hello, welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Chaz Ciadello.
This week, Trump's former national security advisor says the president is unfit for office and a danger to the nation.
Other than that, he quite likes him.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Americans are tearing down statues and throwing out pancake mix, all in the name of Black Lives Matter.
Joe Biden is still flying high in the polls, and we're hitting the road to the swing state of Arizona.
Our guest this week, Republican strategist Ford O'Connell, on what Trump can do to win from here. But first...
President Trump returned to the campaign trail this week with his first rally in over 3 months in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Despite warnings from health officials, it was unsafe in the era of COVID-19. A disappointing crowd, estimated at a little over 6,000, inadvertently provided social distancing in the 19,000-seat BOK Arena. An outdoor spillover event was hastily cancelled because almost nobody was there. Embarrassing after President Trump built up expectations with tweets like this.
Almost 1 million people requested tickets for the Saturday night rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Once on stage, though, it was vintage Donald Trump. Over an hour and a half of mugging and kibitzing for the crowd.
So I was bent over, right?
And trying out attack lines like this.
Biden is a very willing Trojan horse for socialism.
Dabbling in racial stereotypes like this.
Kung flu.
And then this.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
Wait, what? Did he just say he ordered fewer tests so there would be fewer cases identified? Don't worry though, according to White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, the president was just joking.
It was a comment that he made in jest. It's a comment that he made in passing, specifically with regard to the media coverage and pointing out the fact that the media never acknowledges that we have more cases because when you test more people, you find more cases.
Once again, Chaz, the official line is the joke is on the media for taking something the President of the United States says seriously, thinking that he really could be that reckless and crazy. It shows the media's bias. Well, that defence was undermined a little bit this morning when the President said this.
I don't kid. Let me just tell you. Let me make it clear.
But then again, maybe he's just joking about not kidding. Meanwhile, Trump's health advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says at no stage have they actually slowed testing. So there's that.
Yeah, testing's a state issue anyway. But for what it's worth, it did seem to me like he was clearly joking about asking people to test less, but the broader sentiment still reflects what he truly believes. This is what he said the next day when he was being 100% serious.
But did you ask to slow it down?
If it did slow down, frankly, I think we're way ahead of ourselves, if you want to know the truth. We've done too good a job because every time we go out with 25 million tests, you're going to find more people. So then they say, we have more cases in the United States. The reason we have more cases because we do more testing than any other country by far.
Okay, so he's totally serious there and totally wrong. America is ranked 16th in the world amongst large countries for testing per capita, but it's ranked 6th in the world for cases per capita. So actually they're testing relatively less than their peers. But regardless, what most people were focused on was this: 6,200 people in attendance out of 19,200 seats, especially since some people thought that was the result of skullduggery from this ex-Buttigieg campaign worker.
Go reserve tickets now and leave him standing there alone on the stage. What do you say?
TikTok said yes, with people dancing in front of the tickets they weren't planning to honour. So, did the TikTok teens really sabotage Trump? Probably not. 1.1 million people registered to attend, but apparently Trump aides could tell some of them were bogus simply by looking at their voter histories. The campaign said about 300,000 of the registrations were fakes. Furthermore, only about 200,000 registrants lived within driving distance of the rally. They can tell that. So the Trump campaign figured in the worst case scenario they'd have an audience of about 60,000. But why did they then tell people the day before the rally that 100,000 people were expected to show up? That in itself might have discouraged some potential attendees. And also, why did 99.5% of those who registered not turn up? That's not all teens there. Well, according to Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale, it was because of fears of COVID and protesters and rioting that people stayed away. But the rioting was a month ago, and as for protesters, there was a group of them out the front of one of the three entrances, but they only blocked that entrance for 15 minutes. In fact, Trump staffer Katrina Pearson explicitly mocked the lack of protesters earlier in the day. I think Parscale might have been right about the COVID effect though. Oklahoma is the current home to a mini spike in COVID cases, and just last week, a Fox poll found that only 45% of Trump supporters thought it was a good idea for Trump to be holding rallies right now. And 61% of Trump supporters had a favourable view of people wearing masks. Now, don't get me wrong, this was still a failure for Trump, but only because he built expectations so much, even building that hubristic overflow area. The question now becomes about the aftermath. Will there be a further COVID spike, especially from today's speech in Phoenix, a place which has seen one of the biggest spikes in the country? We're talking 2,000 cases a day.
Donald Trump is stunningly uninformed and should not be President of the United States. That is the blunt assessment of his former National Security Advisor, John Bolton.
Having watched Donald Trump for 17 months, I cannot, in good conscience, vote for him. And I think there are a lot of other Republicans who feel the same way.
Bolton, who left the White House in September last year, is promoting the sale of his new book and has sounded an extraordinary warning about the dangers of this president.
The biggest fear I have is that his policy making is so incoherent, so unfocused, so unstructured, so wrapped around his own personal political fortunes, that mistakes are being made that will have grave consequences for the national security of the United States.
President Trump has denied one of the most damaging allegations in the book, that he begged China's President Xi to help him win re-election by buying more soybeans and wheat from American farmers.
I stand by what I said in the book, as I noted in the extract that was published in the Wall Street Journal. I didn't use the exact words because of the pre-publication review process, but the story is correct.
Although according to an unredacted draft of Bolton's book before that review, it was obtained by Vanity Fair this week, it said Trump's exact words were, "Make sure I win." This at a time when President Trump was also withholding military aid from Ukraine until they announced an investigation into Joe Biden, which of course led to Trump's impeachment earlier this year, and just months after Special Counsel Robert Mueller detailed the Russian government's efforts to help Trump win in 2016, which the Trump campaign at the time welcomed. In his book, Bolton confirms many of the central allegations around the Ukraine pressure campaign, but defends not testifying before that impeachment inquiry because he says it was mishandled by Democrats and it would not have led to Trump's removal from office. He does say, though, that that should happen in November.
I think it's important that the American people have these facts as they consider what to do in November, and as we look at our history and see Trump for what I hope history will record it to be, an aberration.
There has been no shortage of pushback against Bolton's claims, though. Some of it enigmatic, like Mike Pompeo tweeting out the definition of traitor. Other pushback was more direct, like South Korea's national security advisor saying Bolton's account does not reflect accurate facts and substantially distorts facts. The least convincing pushback, though, probably came from Trump himself, who claimed that Bolton disagreed with him about the Chinese travel ban, that he thought America shouldn't do the ban, and that Trump didn't consult with Bolton about coronavirus because he had no respect for Bolton's intellect. Maybe. Or maybe that's complete fiction because Trump sacked Bolton 4 months before the coronavirus. Trump also said that a month or so after he appointed Bolton, Trump asked him whether he thought going into Iraq was the right thing to do. And Bolton said yes, and that's when Bolton lost him. But Trump then kept Bolton on for another 15 more months. So what's that all about? I don't think these pushbacks make Trump look a lot better, John.
Well, we're seeing former advisors like Bolton and Mattis dumping all over the president at the moment. The polls are looking bad. So how much trouble is Donald Trump in right now? 4.5 months until election day. Ford OConnell is a Republican strategist, a former advisor to the 2008 McCain-Palin presidential campaign, and a recent congressional candidate himself. In 2015, he was one of the few analysts who took Trump's candidacy seriously. And he joins us now from Fort Myers in Florida. Ford OConnell, welcome back to Planet America.
Great to be here with you, gentlemen.
So, Ford, what does Donald Trump have to do to win this race from here? Because no incumbent American president, with the possible exception of Harry S. Truman, has come back from this far behind at this point to win.
Well, he has to make the case that a United States under Joe Biden would be an unmitigated disaster, specifically that Joe Biden is a senile, Chinese-loving hypocrite who's a willing Trojan horse for socialism. If he's able to make that case to a majority of voters in the battleground states, and he will be reelected. There's no question, though, it's going to be a very tight race.
Ford, if Trump had message discipline, he wouldn't be Trump. So should he resist having a tight message, keep on doing his thing his way and hope it just clicks?
Well, look, it's very important to understand why these rallies are the way they are. They're about energizing his supporters who usually take his message out to their neighborhoods and their towns and their communities, but it's also about energizing the candidate. A lot of times he doesn't have message discipline because he has to try new things, and that's not going to happen in the White House as much as it's going to happen on the campaign trail. So yes, there is a little bit of trial and error, but the bottom line is Donald Trump knows what he's doing.
So how damaging do you think these criticisms from John Bolton are, Ford? He says Donald Trump is unfit for office and he cannot vote for him again. That is, frankly, unprecedented.
It is unprecedented, but I think it's going to be pretty much a nothing burger given how fast the news cycle is in the United States. Who knows what the big story is going to be come October or November. So really, I don't see this as a very big thing because if you like Trump, you're going to stick with Trump. If you don't like Trump, this isn't really going to change the calculus. America is just that divided.
Ford, the polls aren't great for Trump at the moment, but some pollsters say there might be some oversampling of college graduates going on, and also maybe some Trump supporters are discouraged at the moment and aren't answering honestly. Do you think those are genuine issues? And if so, how much difference do you think they might be making?
Well, let me put it this way. I think that the triple whammy of the Chinese virus, the pandemic-induced weak economy, and the social unrest have certainly taken a toll on Trump in the polls. That said, I do think it is absolutely recoverable, and he's got 4 months to make that case. Do I think that there's still a lot of Americans out there who don't want their neighbors to know that they vote for Trump? Absolutely. And do I think that there's an oversampling of college graduates? I do, because there's only, in Australia, people need to realize that only 30% of Americans have actually graduated from college. So how many college graduates could there actually be out there?
Now, Ford, you just used the phrase Chinese virus, and a lot of people think that phrases like that, Kung Flu and others are pretty racist. What is the rationale behind Trump and his supporters using that kind of language?
What President Trump wants the American public to know is where this came from. It came from China. China did not do its job in alerting the world and actually taking care of its own people. And as a result, we are in a global pandemic. So it's very important. And a lot of the U.S. media doesn't want a lot of people to realize that it came from China, because China is a very big issue in this election. And history has shown that Joe Biden is not very strong on China compared to President Trump. In fact, I would say over the last 35 years, just about all American presidents on both sides of the aisle have been pretty weak on China. And President Trump's been the first to really put his foot down when it comes to China.
On coronavirus, Trump seems to be trying to move away from coronavirus at the moment, trying to make it history, even though the numbers are starting to tick up again. Do you think that's the right play, or do you think Trump should still be in war mode against the virus?
Well, here's the deal. We don't have a cure for this virus. We cannot stay locked down. We cannot remain in fear forever. But we're going to have to get back to work, and we're going to have to send our children back to school. I think that President Trump's idea is to move America back to normal as much as you can with the virus, still actually, taking root.
Appreciate your time again, Ford. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
The Black Lives Matter protest movement, fuelled recently by the police killings of George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks, is changing the way that many Americans view institutionalised and culturally ingrained racism. And that goes beyond policing, politicians, place names, flags, statues and other symbols, right onto the supermarket shelves and the breakfast tables of America.
But no matter how crazy it gets, I insist on serving a hot breakfast. That's why I love these.
Aunt Jemima frozen pancakes.
And this is Aunt Jemima. Her name and face appear on one of the best-known brands of pancake products in America, but not for long. Last week, the parent company, Quaker's Oats, announced Aunt Jemima would be changing its brand and image because the figure on the packaging was based on a racial stereotype. Take a look. She's black, she's happy, smiling, hair and makeup done, expensive-looking gold and pearl earrings, a grandmotherly housewife, so kind of outdated and sexist, but racist? Well, Aunt Jemima's already had a makeover. This is what a lot of Americans grew up with.
Aunt Jemima. Aunt Jemima, America's favourite pancake mix.
That was the 1950s, and in the 1980s, to mark the brand's 100th anniversary, Aunt Jemima got herself a new look, and soul singer Gladys Knight to try and bring her up to date.
With Aunt Jemima, now you're cooking.
Not only does Aunt Jemima Light taste better than Log Cabin Regular, it's got more maple in it. And my grandkids think that's cool.
And the ad company even tried to make Aunt Jemima appeal to America's growing Hispanic market. But this is the first image of Aunt Jemima. It's a woman named Nancy Green, herself a former slave who appeared in character as Aunt Jemima, promoting the pancake mix for more than 30 years, starting in 1890, telling nostalgic stories of the pre-war South that ignored the cruelty of slavery. The name Jemima was often used in songs sung by white performers wearing blackface in minstrel shows. Aunt was applied to black women and, like Mammy, it may sound familial but represented the stereotype of the loyal house slave, cooking and cleaning, typified by actress Hattie McDaniel in the 1939 film Gone with the Wind.
If you don't care what folks says about this family, I does. I has told you and told you that you can always tell a lady but the way that she eat in front of folks like a bird. And I ain't aiming for you to go to Mr. John Wilkins's and eat like a field hand and gobble like a hog.
That movie's now getting a new introduction to explain the history behind slavery, and Aunt Jemima will also be Gone with the Wind by the end of the year. In the past week, the owners of Uncle Ben's Rice have announced plans to revise that brand. So is the company behind Mrs. Butterworth's syrup, the bottles of which are moulded in the shape of a Mammy character. Cream of Wheat, which also dates from the late 1800s, is removing its image of a black male cook known as Rastus, another stereotype, even though it was based on a professional cook named Frank White, who was born after slavery ended. And the ice cream called Eskimo Pie is also being hastily rebranded. So things are changing fast, as the singer Kirby says.
Black Lives Matter, people. Even over breakfast.
Cleaning up history can be a bit of a Pandora's box, though. In this case, the cousins of one of the previous Aunt Jemimas is not happy.
We want the world to know that our cousin Lillian Richard was one of the Aunt Jemimas, and she made an honest living. But that is our history, and we should hold on to that history, good or bad.
And the great-grandson of another previous Aunt Jemima was even more negative, accusing the company of erasing his great-grandmother's history. A black female, he noted. It hurts. The issue of taking down statues has also become inflamed. While there isn't a huge amount of support out there for the statues of Confederate soldiers, the general community isn't exactly thrilled about protesters taking down statues of George Washington because he was a slave owner. Or Thomas Jefferson, because he was also a slave owner. And those actions evoke memories of this moment from 2017.
Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him?
I do love
Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner.
Trump got mocked at the time for that, but turns out he was spot on. And now this statue thing has moved to yet another level. People taking down the statue of the man who fought to free the slaves in the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant. And then taking down the statue of the guy who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner for some reason. And then the statue statue of some random Catholic saint had to go. I think at this point they've turned into the mob from The Simpsons. But I think one story captures the complexity of racial politics as well as any. Someone saw what appeared to be a noose hanging in an Oakland park last week. And this is a serious issue, so the mayor started a hate crime investigation. Fair enough, except then some people came forward saying the ropes were actually exercise equipment which had been worn down. This is what they looked like originally, not very threatening. And even more noteworthy, the guy who hung them up in the first place didn't seem like your typical white supremacist.
Out of the dozens and hundreds and thousands of people that have walked by, no one has thought that it looked anywhere close to a noose.
So what happened then? They're still conducting a full investigation anyway, and they've called in the FBI. This mayor is very certain about herself.
The intentions do not matter because the harm is real. They will matter with regard to whether or not this is in fact charged as a hate crime, but they do not matter about whether or not we should tolerate symbols of hate and violence and torture in our public spaces.
What a mess. Well, one more source of racial controversy is military bases named after Confederate soldiers. This is an issue that Trump has gotten right into.
It has been suggested that we should rename as many as 10 of our legendary military bases, such as Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, Fort Benning, etc. These monumental and very powerful bases have become part of a history of winning, victory, and freedom.
Well, that tweet might not be strictly true, but this issue could prompt some very powerful motivational ads.
Is life getting you down? Feel like you'll never amount to anything? Wrong. You may already be qualified enough to have a US Army base named after you.
Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, Fort Benning.
You may have had to have given up your apartment, but Braxton Bragg gave up most of Tennessee in the Second Battle of Chattanooga.
A massive number, the biggest number ever.
Lost your job? Well, John Bell Hood lost an arm, a leg, and 10,000 men.
He let us down. I don't like losers.
Cancelled for casual racism, Henry L. Benning gave a whole speech asserting that the abolition of slavery would lead to the extermination of the white race.
He said some very bad things about a lot of people.
Oh, and he also got routed so badly at Chickamauga that he fell back to his own lines, riding bareback on a stolen artillery horse.
He choked. He was a choker.
In fact, the only thing any of these failures have over you is their beard length. So chin up. I know life's tough, but you've never been decapitated by a cannonball while scouting enemy land, have you? No, you haven't. So here, have yourself a military base. You deserve it. You don't happen to have 9 friends, do you?
Well, here's why Team Trump is trying to jumpstart their campaign with all these rallies. He is not just in danger of losing this November, there's an increased chance it could be an embarrassing landslide. The presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden has bolted to an almost double-digit lead in the average of national polls taken so far in June, 9.5 percentage points, according to Real Clear Politics. Now, it is true that in 2016, Hillary Clinton led Trump by an average of 10 points during the month of March. That was when anti-Trump sentiment was peaking in the Republican Party as well. The primary against Kasich and Cruz was dragging on. By June, Clinton's lead was under 5.5 points, 4 points behind where Biden is now. And by election day, Hillary Clinton was 3.5 points ahead of Trump in those polls. Biden's lead over Trump, though, has also been steadier than Clinton's. In the first half of 2016, Clinton led in 84% of polls to Trump's 14%. So far, Biden has led in 94% of polls to Trump's 1%. Biden has extended his lead in the average of polls in swing states as well, like Florida, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin as well, all above 5 points. And if we feed that into the Electoral College map, here's how it's looking. Biden sailing past the 270 votes he needs to win the presidency, with 318 to Trump's 219. Recent polls show as well Trump is trailing in Ohio, and that North Carolina, Georgia and Texas, as well as Iowa, are looking competitive. So this is what a hypothetical Biden landslide would look like. 411 Electoral College votes to 127. Not at all likely, we have to say, but not impossible, based on current polling.
Yeah, and that's all despite 55% of people thinking it's more likely that Biden is in the early stages of dementia, according to Zogby polling. People just don't seem to care. And incidentally, that is what matters, caring.
Right.
Only 37% of people say Trump cares about people like them, to 57% who say he does not. Whereas for Biden, that's 47% saying he cares, to 41%. Another positive sign for Biden, this is the first month that he and the DNC have outraised Trump. Trump and the RNC raised $74 million in May, whereas Biden and the DNC raised $80 million. He's still miles behind overall, but it is a good sign. And the best sign of all for Biden, the golden rule of elections is that whoever's losing is more keen to hold debates. And the Trump campaign is currently pushing for 4 debates. That is not a good sign from Team Trump at all.
Yeah, careful what you wish for too. There are 132 days to go until the election, and of course a lot can happen in that time. 132 days ago, this was the lead news story. Bernie Sanders was the Democratic frontrunner.
Bernie Sanders leading right now. Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar vying for second.
Heady days indeed, Chaz. Remember Clo-mentum? Well, this week Amy Klobuchar actually ruled herself out of contention to be Biden's VP, saying it's the right time to nominate a woman of colour instead. In reality, of course, the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis probably scuttled her chances anyway. As a former prosecutor there, who didn't really prosecute police, she wasn't, as they say, such a good fit. By the way, Chaz, as well, 132 days ago, February 12 was also the day the novel coronavirus officially was named COVID-19. So it does seem like an eternity.
It does. Well, let's see what's changed since then. The slow trend downwards has continued for national daily COVID deaths, but disturbingly, the trend for national daily new COVID cases has reversed, and it's heading rapidly back up towards its prior peak. Now, Trump would say that's because we're testing too much. There aren't more cases out there. We're just revealing more of the ones that were already there. Well, there's a simple way to tell. What percentage of tests are positive? Less than 5% positive test means no problems. Between 5 and 10% positive is and more than 10% positive means you're in trouble. So, 31 states are okay, 14 states are a bit marginal, and then you got serious concerns about Texas, Florida, Utah, South Carolina, and most of all, Arizona, with 21% of tests being positive. Not a good place to have given a speech to a crowded hall today. Oh, and just to confirm, those are Texas's new daily cases trending rapidly up, and those are Florida's daily cases trending rapidly up as well. But the takeaway, John, is a big red flashing warning sign for Arizona.
Indeed it is. Well, let's find out some more about that potentially crucial swing state with a virtual road trip to Arizona. Arizona, the Grand Canyon state. The canyon itself is the result of millions of years of dedicated erosion by the Colorado River. Around 2 kilometres deep, nearly 450 kilometres long and close to 30 kilometres wide. It attracts around 6 million tourists in an ordinary year. The first people passed through Arizona around 10,000 years ago. Since then, Native American tribes, including the Hopi and the Navajo, have called it home. Arizona used to be part of New Mexico and before that, Old Mexico, and became the 48th state of the Union in 1912. That history is still evident in Arizona's demographics. Just over half the population of around 7 million is white. Almost 1/3 is Hispanic or Latino. 5% are Native American, same again for African American, and 3% Asian. Politically, Arizona has been a reliably red Republican state since the early 1950s, with just the one exception, in 1996, when Democrat President Bill Clinton won it. Arizona also has a reputation for producing mavericks, like Republican Senator Barry Goldwater, who ran for president in 1964.
Vote for Barry Goldwater. In your heart, you know he's right.
3.5 decades later, Arizona produced another senator with White House hopes, John McCain.
I didn't go to Washington to win Mr. Congeniality. I went there to serve my country.
In 2016, Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton had hopes as well of repeating her husband's feat 20 years prior and campaigned hard in Arizona in the final weeks when polls showed her leading in Arizona.
Clinton has 44% of the voter support here. She's leading Donald Trump by 2 percentage points. That's within the margin of error, by the way.
And at that point, it looked like Clinton had the White House in the bag, only to come up short and then rue not tending to the Democrats' own backyard in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin. In fact, Hillary Clinton's percent of the popular vote in Arizona 4 years ago was identical to Barack Obama's when he lost to John McCain in 2008 by 8.5 points. So, is Arizona really a battleground in 2020? Well, Joe Biden has led President Trump in 11 polls this year. Trump has led in 2, and 2 were tied. In the average of polls, Biden is in front by over 3 points. Unlike 2016, there aren't high-profile third-party candidates like Libertarian Gary Johnson or the Greens' Jill Stein scooping up anywhere from 5 to 10% of the vote. Still, polls show a similar number of Arizonans are undecided or looking at other options. Arizona also has a very competitive Senate race on this year. Republican Senator Martha McSally, a former Air Force pilot who was appointed to fill a Senate vacancy last year, is facing Democratic challenger Mark Kelly. A retired NASA astronaut, Kelly is also the husband of former Arizona Representative Gabby Giffords, who was left with a brain injury after being shot in the head at a public event in Tucson in 2011. And polls show the Republican is struggling to hold on to a seat that could swing the Senate majority to Democrats next year. Joe Biden doesn't need to win Arizona's 11 Electoral College votes to win the presidency, but it would provide him with another path to 270 electoral votes if, like Clinton, he stumbles somewhere in the Rust Belt, and his hopes of a friendly Senate would certainly depend on it. And that's all for this week's Planet America. Join us on Friday night for the Fireside Chat on the News Channel, when we're going to be talking to the Greens Party presidential nominee, Howie Hawkins.
We'll see you back here for another trip to Planet America, this time next week. If you miss us, you can catch us on iView, Facebook and YouTube.
Good night.